brothers, our sisters, our female population to whatever the decision you decide. We need to trust that. We wanted to be an energy leader with every source of energy, not just one. And we need a governor believe in that. And we need a governor believe in integrity. We believe in, human dignity. And we need a governor. And I think that's all packaged in one. That is better overall. And I tell you this, he is doing everything possibly he can. Now it is our turn to turn out and vote and elect Beto to be the next governor of this great state of Texas. The man himself. Thank you so much.
Hey, Missouri City, how we doing? Good to be with you. So grateful for our great county chairwoman who always gets us fired up, always brings really good people together. She was literally there with us the very first time that we came to Fort Bend County. Introduced us, I got a chance to meet her, and I knew there was something special here. For some, when KP George won November of 2018, it was a surprise. Not for those of us who turned up in 2017 and saw the energy that you brought, your leadership to this county. KP George, who is defining what it looks like when a Democrat is in a position of power and public trust. They focus on the people, not the corporations, not the big money donors, but the people. Focusing on jobs, focusing on public health, focusing on doing the right thing before you ever look at the polls or consider the political consequence. This guy is making Fort Bend and by extension Texas proud. Thank you, KP George. Only going to recognize two more because I realize we have about 400 elected officials or candidates with us today. Ron Reynolds, I just saw yesterday in the state capitol. Guy is busting his ass for the community, for every single constituent, fighting on their behalf, especially as inflation right now in Texas because of Greg Abbott is going through the roof. Called me and says, I want to introduce you, Beto, to one of my constituents who, like so many others here that I represent, is seeing her home appraisal go through the roof, is seeing the property taxes that she'll have to pay go through the roof. She may not be able to keep that roof over her head and the head of her family right now. We've got to do something to help these people. And Ron, I know you are focused on doing that, working together. We are going to get that done. And though he is not with us, Boris Miles was one of those who's with us from the very beginning in 2017. We are so grateful that he's with us again. This guy also working so hard for this community, this district. Saw him fight the good fight for voting rights last year and the year before as they tried to change and then rig the rules of these elections to disenfranchise his very constituents. Went to the mat to see if he could get it done, was willing to do everything within his power to stand up for everyone here. He did not care, Democrat, Republican, or independent, wants to get the job done. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the people that we are going to be able to work with when we win this election in November of 22. Folks are going to ask you, when you have a chance to see them after this event, you have dinner or drink with them later, you see them tomorrow in church, you go back to work on Monday. I know that you saw Beto. What is this guy all about? Here is what we are for. Number one, we want the best jobs in America created right here in the state of Texas. We want those to be jobs that pay. There are more people living below a living wage in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. What does that mean? It means they're working a second job, sometimes a third, taking on that extra shift, dependent on public assistance, sleeping in shelters, or sometimes all too often on the streets with their families and with their kids. In the 9th largest economy on planet Earth, it is not for lack of resources that we have folks sleeping right now on the streets when we go home to our comfortable homes and beds. It is for lack of political will. In a state where the minimum wage is still $7 $14.25 an hour. We got to make sure that we raise it and get it up to 15 as soon as we possibly can. Let me try this one on for you. What if in Texas women were able to make the same amount that men make for the same job, doing the same work at the same value? That's something we can focus on. And then there are the paths to prosperity that we need more of in the state of Texas. I was in North Texas in Tarrant County just a few weeks ago. Had a chance to meet with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and specifically the young men and women in the apprenticeship program. It's a 5-year program. You can enter it right out of high school. You're working on site, so you are earning while you are learning. And after those 5 years are done and you graduate into a journeyman or journeywoman position, you're making $68,000, $75,000, $85,000 on up. Everything that you have learned is competitive for you, not just here in Texas, but any other state in the union to which you might travel. And listening to these people in the program, they say, Beto, I keep hearing you talk about this being a great job. Well, it might be, but for me, this is a career. I look forward when I wake up in the morning to coming in and learning again and again, improving, making myself better, having the purpose and the function and the fulfillment that we all crave in our lives, that we all want for our kids and our grandkids. Unions in Texas could be a great path if we would expand the right to organize in this state to make sure that more people earn that living wage, have that purpose, and have that fulfillment. That leads to great jobs. These early college high schools that I keep seeing, where kids at the age of 18 graduate not just with a high school diploma, but as they cross that stage, they also pick up an associate's degree. 2 years of college under their belt. They're only 18 years old. They're not out a dime to themselves or to their parents, and they are ready to go either the next 2 years of college or working a job that pays well above the living wage here in the state of Texas. That is a smart investment, and I want to make sure that the state of Texas right now, which is paying 40% of the cost of public education, when it used to pay 50%, picks up its fair share of the burden again, so we can invest in early college high school for any young person in Texas who wants to be able to do that. One more for you. Do we have any nurses among us? We have some in the back. First of all, thank you for what you do and what you have been doing ever since you entered the profession, especially over the last 2 years. We have lost so many nurses over the course of this pandemic. Nurses who really felt that they did not have a choice. Even if they knew they could quit, they could go do something else. They knew that the lives of those that they cared for were on the line, so they would put their own lives there as well. Those nurses have told me that 2 years ago they were heroes to the people of these communities and of this state, but far too often right now they feel like they're being treated like zeros by this state of Texas. Nurses fleeing the profession, converting into travel nurses, going to other communities and other states to earn 2 or 3 times what they could earn if they stayed here in Missouri City or Fort Bend County. A nurse-to-patient ratio that was 1 to 4, 1 to 3 is now 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8. Fewer nurses taking care of more people waiting longer in the emergency room, waiting room to see somebody. They're frustrated. Who do they take it out on? On that nurse who is right there. The fact that in this state, we ask these nurses to take on tens of thousands of dollars in debt for the privilege of taking care of us and saving our lives makes no sense to me. So when we win this race, how about we clear the debt of those nurses so they can focus on that job? Remove the debt that's in their way when they want to enter this profession. Those are just a few ways that we address the challenges before us to make sure that everyone can work a great job in the state of Texas. We can do this. So that's point number 1, great jobs. Point number 2, and very much related to the first one, to get there, we need a world-class system of public education. Now, I know we all want that, but if we are going to confront some uncomfortable truth, we are nowhere close to being there right now. In the average 4th grade classroom in the state of Texas, 7 out of 10 of those 4th graders cannot read at grade level. Unfortunately, that's a pretty damn good predictor of their chances going forward academically, graduating from high school, post-secondary education. the ability to compete for one of those living wage jobs that I just talked about right now. And the educators here know that you will not fix that in 4th grade or in 3rd grade. You have to fix that when that kid is 3 or 4 years old. What about all-day universal pre-K in the state of Texas? So these kids have the education at the right age to make sure they're just as competitive as any kid in any other state. But if we're really going to get serious about public education, and I am, then we've got to talk about the educators, the classroom teachers, the counselors, the school librarians, the speech-language pathologists, everyone who makes public ed possible. They are leaving this profession by the thousands right now. 50% of Texas teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years. My 11-year-old, who goes to the same public school that I went to when I was 11 years old, Mesita Elementary. It is now April. His school year started in August. He's up to his 4th substitute teacher. He has yet to have a permanent classroom teacher. I wish that were the exception, but it is becoming the rule throughout this state right now. And when you realize that Texas school teachers are underpaid by $7,500 on average against a national school teacher, that half of them are working a second job to make ends meet, how many restaurants and every now and then a bar have I been in when the person serving me says, "Hey Beto, I hear you talk about public ed all the time. I'm one of those teachers. I teach kindergarten or special ed, and then I pick up these shifts on the weekends so I can make ends meet, pay the note on my mortgage, put food on the table. That's what I have to do so that I can support my full-time focus, what I wish was full-time, making sure that our kids are connected to a lifelong love of learning." So, listening to teachers, treating them as the professionals that they are with the dignity and respect that they are owed. Here's what we could do. 1, pay them enough so they don't have to take on a 2nd or 3rd job. Listen to them when they tell us we should cancel the STAR test at least this year. And going forward, replace that with something that teachers can come up with on their own, something that's used as a diagnostic to get resources where they are needed, not as a punitive tool to take resources away from teachers and schools and principals. We can do much better on that count. And then those retired teachers who are among us right now, you have not had a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord, 2004. And meanwhile, prices are going sky high for medicine, for gas, for groceries, for rent, and yes, for your tax bill on your property taxes. I want to make sure that you have a cost of living adjustment every single year, because if we want to attract and retain teachers, they're going to be looking to how we treat those who preceded them in the classroom, and there better be a good story to tell. Last one, and this to me is a no-brainer. So our 4 border states, excluding Chihuahua and some of the other Mexican states to the south of us, but Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, 3 of them under Republican governors elected to expand Medicaid. Now, quick refresher, I'm sure most of you know this, Medicaid was cooked up in Texas. First signed into law by LBJ, the first Texas president, in 1965, within months of him signing the Voting Rights Act of that same year. He did this to make sure that no Texan, no American would be too poor to be able to see a doctor, fill a prescription, or take their kiddo to a mental health care provider when they needed it. He wanted everyone to be healthy enough and well enough to live to their full potential. Well, there's a deal on the table right now that says DC will send our money that we've paid in income taxes back to us, 90 cents on the dollar, for Medicaid expansion if we will just take yes for an answer. $10 billion a year, $100 billion has piled up so far on that distant table, more likely going to other states instead of Texas right now. If we, which we will after we win this race, accept Medicaid expansion, that's $10 billion that connects more people with care, fewer dying of diabetes or curable cancers or the flu, which is still happening in the state of Texas today, the least. The big kicker is because right now, when someone who has diabetes and now has glaucoma and doesn't have insulin or insurance finally succumbs to the suffering and takes themselves to the hospital where the outcomes will not be so good as if they've been able to get that care and treatment preventively and earlier, and the cost will be exponentially higher. Is it 50,000 bucks? Is it 150,000 bucks? God only knows. But because they don't have a dime to their name, it's not as though the bill disappears. All of us will be forced at the end of the day to pick it up. And very often that happens through your property taxes. So $10 billion a year begins to drive down that cost of living in the state of Texas. It's just the right thing to do. And these things that I'm talking about, great jobs, world-class schools, the ability to see a doctor, they are not the province of Democrats nor of Republicans. These are things that all of us as Texans can agree on. We may not agree on everything, and of course we won't, but on this much, there is common ground right now. So that's what we want. That's what we stand for. That's what we're going to do, and it is the perfect contrast to the guy who's in that position of power right now, who only seeks to divide us and pit us against one another and further fracture this already overly polarized state on every single issue. This guy, as the county judge just said, who could not keep the lights on in the energy capital of the world. This guy responsible for the deaths of more than 700 of our fellow Texans who froze, even though it got a lot colder in other parts of the country and they did not have those same problems, because he was warned repeatedly that we had underlying vulnerabilities in the grid, and he chose, because it was a choice, to do nothing. It wasn't God or Mother Nature who did this to us last February. It was Greg Abbott. And the tens of billions of dollars in property damage that you and others sustained when those pipes finally burst and ruined your drywall and sent rot up your walls to your roof, ruined the floorboards, ruined those pipes that you have to replace that cost 5 or 6 times more because there's such a demand on them. To add insult to injury on top of all of that, your electricity bills on average have gone up $50 per month since that storm because of Greg Abbott. We call that the Abbott tax that every single Texan is paying right now. We need a governor who's going to listen to the experts, who's going to make sure that we return money to ratepayers, not take it from them, who's going to get the $11 billion stolen from us by those energy companies and their CEOs who charged 200 times the rate of fuel during that disaster when people were freezing to death, literally, and get that money back to you and reduce the inflation that we're seeing here and fix the grid so the lights are always on in the state of Texas. We can get that done. A guy who has single-handedly taken away the right for every woman to make her own healthcare decisions, to decide her own future, who's put a $10,000 bounty on the backs of anyone who assists her, and has made no exception for rape or incest. Something that would have been hard for us to imagine, something left to fiction, but now is our reality here in the state of Texas and is now being exported from one state to another, further exacerbating a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for black women in this community and every part of Texas. Mark my words, when we win this race, every woman in Texas makes her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. Y por último, another example of pitting us against one another. Greg Abbott, instead of paying those teachers that living wage that they deserve and that they've earned, he's now asking them to turn in the parents of transgender kids, reporting them for child abuse, which, if that accusation is sustained after a CPS investigation, those kids will be taken from their loving parents who are doing everything within their power to help that child navigate one of the most difficult moments in their lives, put them in foster care, into a system where there are already 30,000 kids, a system that has gone, in the words of Judge Shack, from bad to worse, where last year 100 children in the custody and care of the state of Texas lost their lives. Hundreds more were trafficked for their bodies, all under the auspices of the state of Texas and under the leadership of Governor Abbott. On this one, not only are we going to stand up and fight for those transgender children and every kid in the state of Texas, regardless of our differences, But we're going to put the resources into CPS. We're going to hire more caseworkers. We're always going to look towards family placement where we can. We're going to support foster care parents and make sure they don't have to jump through every hoop under the sun in order to do the right thing. And we're going to make sure that this state is distinguished by looking out for and caring for and elevating the most vulnerable among us. We get past this craziness, this extremism, these fringe policies of the current governor, who's been an absolute failure on every single thing he has touched. We can get back to the big things that we should be known for here in Texas and all around the world. But the only way we're going to do that is by deciding that we are going to do that together. There is no one candidate, there's no political party, there is no one organization that is going to pull this off. It has got to be the people of Texas. Now, in the 2020 election, there were 7 million eligible Texans who did not cast a ballot in what is arguably the most consequential election in, if not U.S. history, then at least in our lifetimes. We shouldn't judge. I'm sure nobody here does, but sometimes we're tempted to get on a high horse and say, well, if you didn't vote, you get what you deserve. Let's acknowledge that there are some who are asked to wait hours in line outside of Texas Southern University, for example. We saw the photos and the video. On the one hand, we're so proud of anyone who would endure a 3-hour line to cast a ballot, but on the other hand, we are deeply ashamed that anyone is forced to do that in this great democracy. We learned that in February, during early voting of this year, a 95-year-old World War II veteran who put his life on the line in World War II to fight fascism half a world away, to defend democracy here at home, had his vote by mail ballot rejected not once, but 3 separate times. If anyone has earned the right to vote in this country, it is that gentleman and any veteran who's put their lives on the line here. But in Texas, it is harder to vote, harder to register, harder to participate in our politics than any other state. And it is by design who they are targeting. So here's my request of you. If you have not already, please text the word Texas to 20377. When you do that, text Texas to 20377. We will sign you up to be a volunteer. And by volunteer, it means I'm going to ask you to knock on the doors of those registered, eligible, but non-voting neighbors of yours. When you show up in person, it will be so much more powerful and profound than any television ad that we can put up on the air, any cute thing that we could put on social media, any piece of mail that will arrive in their mailbox. Another human being, looking at them eye to eye, face to face, human being to human being. That is as powerful as it gets. And they will never forget that visit. And when you, in your own words, from your own heart, describe why this election means something to you, whether it's something that you heard me say here today or something that you hold true to yourself and your family that is why you've come out this evening, I want you to share that message at their doors. And won't it be some pretty powerful political justice if the very people targeted for voter suppression become the margin of victory when we win this thing on November 8th of 2022. So I want your help to reach out to these folks. I am so grateful that you came here today. We are going to host this as a town hall. So if anyone has a question, an idea, a suggestion, or a thought, Cynthia Connell right here has got a microphone. We're going to switch microphones, and she will take it to you. Raise your hand, and she'll bring it out. But Missouri City, thank you for having us out here today. Huge, huge honor to be with you.
Hi, right behind you. How are you? I am Dr. Janice Little. I am a community advocate for crime survivors as well as other children who are in CPS custody as well. I just serve the community as an advocate. My question is, are you available to attend the National Healing Vigil for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice? We have it here in Fort Bend County on April 30th at 11 a.m. in Richmond, but it's a National Healing Vigil.
Sorry about that. Dr. Little, I think Dr. Little, thank you for being here and for what you do and for the invitation. I'm pretty sure that I will be in El Paso, Texas that day after a few weeks on the road to see kids. So, but she just reminded me that they have that there in El Paso as well. So it's something that I would love to do. And thank you for making me aware of it. I want to also thank you for your advocacy for crime victims. This is something that's really important, obviously, but let me put it in perspective by the numbers. Since Greg Abbott has taken office, the clearance rate for violent crime in the state of Texas has dropped from 70% to 50%. That means less justice. That means less resolution. That means that there are more people on the streets who have harmed somebody, sometimes grievously, sometimes into their lives, without being apprehended or brought to justice. That means that fewer people have the closure that they need to be able to move forward in their lives. That is part of the cost and consequence of focusing on stunts and divisive issues and pitting us against each other instead of listening to leaders like yourself in the community, instead of listening to law enforcement who, for example, asked the governor, almost downright begged him, not to sign into law permitless carry, which allows anybody to carry a loaded gun in public without training or a background check. And predictably, gun violence has spiked in our communities, and Texas leads the nation in the number of sheriff's deputies and police officers who have been gunned down, bar none. It's the one category we do not want to lead in that we are today. So I want to make sure that we listen to everyone involved, from law enforcement to community leaders to victims of crime in our communities, to make sure that we do a better job going forward. I'm looking forward to participating in the vigil, thanks to your invitation, and then working with you going forward.
Pastor Michael Grady is the contact.
Wonderful. We know Pastor Michael Grady in El Paso, who unfortunately his daughter, talking about gun violence, was one of those who was shot in El Paso on August 3rd, 2019. Thank God she survived, but it was a pretty bad deal for that family. And so they know something about this, and I will make sure that we get in touch with them. Cynthia, you'll make sure we do that? Thank you. Thank you.
All right, if you raise your hand, I will come to you. If you have a question, all right, I see you back there. Here I come.
Hello, Mr. Bendel. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome.
Thank
I'm
you.
from Rosenberg, Texas. I'm Iris Galvan, and I'm a certified community health coach and also prevention counselor. I used to work long ago with communities and schools. I'm kind of semi-retired now. But the thing is that my question is, my thinking is about this violence is that it's been here for a long time. The thing is that back in the 90s, I remember that people like Constable Victor Trevino in inner city Houston and other folks were really, leaders in the community were really involved with trying to build relationships in the community. I was trying to send a message to the county judge there in Harris County that the thing is that it's about building relationships. I think that we should have like a guardian program nationwide or even here in Texas to have people in the community get involved, more involved, because a lot of these people that are in the prisons, a lot of times they come from abused backgrounds. So I think also more trauma-focused stuff going on, and also prevention with the kids. I used to work with students, and I think kids just need the attention to not get in gangs, to not be involved with the other side, so to speak. So that's my take on that, and I think that everybody needs to be involved. People in the community, everyone. So anyway, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Galvan, for being here, for the comments. There's a lot that goes into this, right? If you're 50th in the nation, as we are, in access to mental health care, and your largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system, and the largest inpatient facility in the entire state of Texas of 30 million is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas, we now know almost everything we need to know about some of the conditions that exacerbate these problems or lead to them in the first place. People literally wanting to get arrested to be treated for their schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, or clinical depression. I know too many people who have told me that story directly. I've walked that jail with the sheriff, who has pointed out what it takes in terms of the toll on his deputies to do that, instead of being out there preventing and bringing to justice violent crimes and violent criminals. So there's a lot more that we can do, from mental health to even rethinking some of the policing that we do, and ensuring that if it's homelessness, I don't know that we need a police interaction with that. Is there a social worker or provider or somebody from the community who can connect that person with care? If it's a mental health care episode and it is nonviolent, again, maybe there's a better person to go in there and allow the police to focus on deterring, investigating, and solving violent crimes in our communities. I think that's the thing that we're most concerned about going forward. So thank you for the comments. Appreciate that.
Hello, Beto. Welcome to Fort Bend County. You're always welcome back here.
Thank you.
My question today is the existential threat that is climate change that is facing all of us and the generations of kids, not yet born either, that will live in a country and a world that is inhabitable for them to live. How will we address that in Texas, becoming an energy leader, provider for the nation of energy solutions that can solve this problem, that will responsibly address a situation that we're in? How will we fight the denialism that is occurring at all of our companies in this area that are stuck in the profit motive that is natural gas and gasoline? How will we move past this to bring our country and our world into a more sustainable future?
Thank you for this great question. We were at Lamar University, not too far from here in Beaumont, Texas, not too far from Spindletop. In the technology of geothermal drilling, where we basically extract the value of heat trapped under the ground that is renewable, will be there forever, and is almost a one-to-one match with oil and gas drilling technologies. And again, you know, there was some poetry to it that in the place that really started the oil and gas boom for this state more than 100 years ago, you have young people who are, through their ingenuity and innovation, going to help us to expand our energy leadership and at the same time successfully confront this challenge of climate change before it is too late. When you add to that what Houston, Fort Bend, and surrounding areas here, the energy capital of the world. If Texas is the energy capital, this region is its capital. What we're doing on hydrogen, what we're doing on wind power, including exploring offshore wind power, and what we're doing on utility scale solar. One, it meets the challenge that you just described of generating more of what we need to power our lives from renewable resources. But two, these are among the fastest growing jobs in America today. And furthermore, some country is going to corner the market on this stuff. Some country's going to have pride of place. I want it to be America more than I do China or anywhere else. And within America, I want that to be Texas. We are the energy leaders today, but we cannot take for granted that it will be there tomorrow unless we have the leadership that realizes that. And it sounds like you, like me, like I think all of us here want to make sure that we do not take for granted what we have in Texas right now. So whether it's for climate or the jobs, or because right here in this community we understand the impacts of climate change better than anybody else. After 60 inches of rain falls in one storm in 2017, the landfall record for North America, as long as we've been keeping records on this continent, we should have the leadership here. And I want to make sure that I work with the folks of this community as governor to bring that leadership to market and that market to the global stage. That's how we're going to confront this successfully. Thank you for asking the questions. Appreciate that.
Right here to your right. To your right.
Hi, Beto. My name is Daniel C., and I'm from Sugar Land, Texas. And welcome to Fort Bend County.
Thank you.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Hi. I wanted to ask a question. It's that I'm concerned, like we talked about the school shooting in El Paso. There was also one that happened near Galveston, Texas. My concern is about these guns is that they're easy to get. And how are we going to handle whenever, you know, hopefully you do get elected to be our next governor? Let's just hope you'll be our future governor. How are we going to handle with gun control, especially young people getting these guns? Because they're easy to get, and my concern is violence is still going to keep going on the more they keep getting them.
Daniel, thank you for asking the question. So, as you know, I grew up in El Paso, and like many guns, to use a firearm. My great uncle Raymond, who was the jail captain, sheriff's deputy, he won the marksman's award. It was the thing he was most proud of, and so he taught me and my sisters how to shoot. but he taught us the responsibility of owning that firearm. And my dad, who was responsible for keeping the guns in our house, kept them under lock and key so that I and my sisters at a young age couldn't get our hands on it. One of the parents who lost her daughter at Santa Fe High School in Galveston County has proposed a safe storage law, which, for example, would say if you have young kids in the household and you have firearms, it's okay to have those guns, but just make sure they're not accessible to those kids. So one of them doesn't find it accidentally and turn it on herself or on her brother or take it into school. We hate to bring this up because it's very painful to think about, but it happens all the time in this country and in the States. So we've got to do something about it. Now, we're still able to protect our Second Amendment right, but we're also able to better protect the lives of those around us. Another idea is universal background checks. So a month after the El Paso shooting, there was a guy who walked into a gun shop trying to buy an AR-15 from a federally licensed gun dealer who's required to perform a background check. He couldn't pass it, but he didn't give up there because in Texas, we do not have universal background checks. So he could go buy that from a private seller out of the trunk of his car, purchase that weapon, and then turn it on his fellow citizens in Midland and Odessa, killing 7 of them, and I think then turning the gun on himself. Universal background checks might have stopped that mass murder. When you add Sutherland Springs and El Paso, those are 4 U.S. history. They've all taken place in Texas, and just within the last 5 years. I know that we can do better, and I know on just those 2 issues, there is a common ground to move forward with Republicans and Democrats, gun owners and non-gun owners alike. But I want to address 2 things that may be on your mind as well. One is the fact that I do not think anyone should have an AR-15 or an AK-47 because that weapon was designed for use on a battlefield. It's terribly good at taking the lives of human beings. That's what they engineered it to do. That high impact, high velocity round, it shreds all the soft tissue in your system. You bleed out before we can get to you and revive you. And I know that because I've met the family members of the 23 people who were murdered with an AK-47, one of these high-powered assault rifles in El Paso. And I am remembering the question asked by the wife of one of the victims who said, "Hey, Beto, why does anyone need one of these guns? You don't use it for hunting. You don't need it for self-defense. There's no practical purpose other than killing people." Now, to be clear, there are people among us right now who own AR-15s and AK-47s, or family members that we have, and you and they, I would wager, own them responsibly, keep them locked up, but never turn them against another human being. You may like to shoot them for sport. You may like to collect them. You may hunt feral hogs with them. As one gun owner in Roscoe, Texas said, if you need an AR-15 to take down a feral hog, you are a worse shot than I thought you were to begin with. But, so I just want to acknowledge that not everyone is going to come to the same conclusion that I have, and I don't think any less of you for that. In this great democracy, we can hold opposing views and discuss this civilly and just search for enough common ground to make some progress. So I offer those 2 of universal background checks and safe storage laws as a place that we can begin. But the other thing that I want to tell you, if you're thinking about that long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership in the state of Texas, the person who is out of step right now is Greg Abbott. That permitless carry bill that the police officers and sheriffs asked him not to sign. They also told him that there were 35,000 licenses to carry a firearm that were denied over the last 5 years because law enforcement deemed those requesting too dangerous to themselves, to their families, to their spouses, so they were denied. And there were tens of thousands more who never applied for one because they never would have passed the background check. Now all of them are armed, loaded, on our streets. We have no power to stop them, to ensure that we vet them, to background check them, even to train them to make sure that they are proficient with that weapon before they are carrying it in public. And we saw an awful tragedy not too long ago where in Harris County somebody was being robbed at an ATM, took out his gun, which he had thanks to permitless carry, tried to shoot the robber, instead killed a little girl in the back of her family's van. This will only lead to more gun violence. That's why law enforcement is against it. And we got to remember that when our friends and family ask us about this question. Say, look, Beto is for these common sense, common ground ideas like universal background check, like making sure we store this stuff safely, and he rejects this crazy stuff like permitless carry, which most of our fellow Texans oppose as well. Abbott did this for one group and one group alone. That is the NRA and the gun lobby and the donations that come in from them. We need a governor whose only interest is the people of Texas and making sure that they are safe. So we'll do that. Thank you for asking.
Hi, my name's Mark Hernandez. I'm really grateful to ask you this. Whenever we go out day to day, most of us have to drive no matter where we go, to our jobs, to our schools, to even friends' house, to our friend's house, sorry. So I ask you this, will you make a commitment to expand public transit to fundamentally change how we move around in the land that we live in this great state of Texas?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Great, thank you for asking the question. So the answer is yes. And let me tell you what's on the line right now. The most historic infrastructure bill since probably the Eisenhower administration was just passed by President Biden on a bipartisan basis. Tens of billions of dollars are about to make their way to Texas, but it is still unclear whether our governor will accept the money. He's instructed agency heads and department heads to look a second time before they receive our tax dollars coming back to our state. He's made no plan to ask for supplemental funding that was part of the package, which Texas has to come up with a plan, produce that, submit it, and then maybe get the money back. None of that is happening so far. So whether it's our surface transportation, our roads, which we absolutely need to fix and connect more parts of the state to. If you've been to the Rio Grande Valley lately, you realize that it's not connected to the interstate highway system. Still a part of Texas that is lacking that. But to your enough roads to satisfy all of the demand that is out there if we're all going to be driving our own cars by ourselves going forward. Not only is it expensive to build out, every single new mile that we build out, we also have to take care of in perpetuity. So this idea of transit and other modes of mobility is really important to me. I served on the city council in El Paso for 6 years. We had one of the worst transit systems in the United States of America. And like so many of these transit systems in Texas, in large part that had to do with who was riding the bus. Happened to be the more lower income residents who were here on visas or from Ciudad Juarez working in El Paso, Texas. In other words, people who did not donate, didn't have political clout, and may not have voted. But luckily, working with colleagues on the city council, we invested heavily in those buses, in our transit routes, in a new trolley system, and turned it around to the best mid-sized transit system in the United States of America, bar none. So we are going to make sure that transit is a focus as we spend these billions of dollars coming through, connect more people in their communities to school, to work, and to friends, as you just said. And I appreciate you raising this issue. Thank you very much.
Back by the table.
I'm claiming Governor Beto now.
I love it. We are going to do this.
We're going to do that.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you. I was just wondering, there was a bill back in 2019. Has anything else happened about that? Do you know of?
I don't know, and I didn't even know that a bill had been filed on this for 2019, but I do know from listening to these healthcare professionals after the pandemic around right now by very frustrated people waiting very long wait times in our ERs, in our intensive care units. So, but please go on.
That's all I was saying. I was just wondering, do you know if there has been if it has moved on, has it moved forward or anything?
I don't know. We can look at it, and Cynthia can get your contact information so that we can follow up. But I think the larger point is we've got to be able to look out for those who are looking out for us. And right now, they're bearing the brunt of a lot of frustration and anger in our communities.
Right. And not only this, we're forced to work long hours, taken away from our families. Nursing is a hazardous job. You know? And so come on. I mean,
we got got your back. I want to make sure that we work with you. Cynthia's going to get your contact info so I can follow up on this bill, get back to you. But larger point, I want to stay in touch with you so that we get this right going forward. Thank you for asking.
All right, these are great questions. We have time for a few more.
Thank you so much, Beto, for being here. My name is Camilo, and I'm proudly here with my mom, Dr. Sanchez. Our primary issue is the raising of young children, particularly in early childhood education. Other states across the U.S., including, well, I guess it's not a state, but Canada, Minnesota, Massachusetts, North Carolina, have developed early education programs that help parents rear children 0 to 5 by giving them the education, the tools they need at a low cost. My mom and I here in Texas started our own company to provide early childhood education in Texas to parents. And what we were amazed to find is that there's not even a conversation going on at the state level for facilitating this. And as you well know, the research indicates that, the first 5 years of life are critical not only for preventing any illnesses, but for developing children's potential to their fullest. And so I'm asking you today, will this be a conversation you start? And if you do start it, what do you hope to do?
Yes, so in addition to what we talked about earlier in terms of all-day universal pre-K, in terms of what we talked about earlier in terms of ensuring that we have a foster care system that actually does the job that it is supposed to do by hiring more caseworkers, paying them more, retaining them, and looking at family placement. And as somebody said at our last meeting, fostering the family and not just the child. I want to work with you in terms of what else we can do from 0 to 5 to make sure that that kid has the best shot of anywhere in this country, and it's right here in the state of Texas. And that is not determined by their zip code or the color of their skin or their religion or their how long they've been a citizen, 10 generations or 10 days. If they're here in our community, I want them to be able to thrive and to succeed. So would love to work with you on this. And again, Cynthia, or one of our volunteers, I see Kate, I want to make sure that we get your contact information so that we can follow up. Thank you for asking.
I got it. Thank you, Beto. To your right. I'm over here to your right.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
My name is Fernando. My question is a statement. Are we supporting Ukraine? Because that's where the democracy is being fought right now. If we weaken Putin, then we have all the autocrats, including ours in the United States, weakened. So we need to support the Democrats for the democracy of Ukraine. That's where the future is, even if you don't know clear. That's it.
Thank you for saying that. I think we agree with you. Wherever democracy is under attack, it is certainly under attack right now in Ukraine. We want to stand with its defenders. And even when it is not violently under attack, but still under attack nonetheless, as it is here in Texas, we want to stand with those, including the election poll workers, the county clerks, the people who are actually literally under attack right now. There's new provisions in the criminal code written last year to prosecute them and to try to scare people away from voting. We have these partisan poll watchers who now have free reign inside of our polling places. And we saw from leaked video in Harris County, they are targeting overwhelmingly African-American majority precincts to go watch the polls and try to deter or intimidate or suppress the votes of our fellow Texans. You all saw this story, right? 13% of the ballots cast in the state of Texas in our last primary were rejected. The high water mark in years before was 1%. And it's no accident who's being targeted right now. It's younger Texans, it's black Texans, it's brown Texans, it's communities of color, it's those with disabilities right now. We are under attack, and how we acquit ourselves will define us forever. That's why I want everybody to sign up and be one of our block walkers. We will not just send you out in October, maybe even in September, to ask people to vote when election time rolls around. We'll send you out today to make sure that the voters you're talking to understand the rules of the road, and so that we too can defend democracy here in Texas. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
I have time for just a few more right here to your right. Right here to your right. There you go.
I'm Berlin Pickney. I'm from Missouri City. I want to welcome you to Houston, Texas, Missouri, and around Texas. You've done a great job. And what I want to say is, I'm a community organizer who goes through the community and have organized what we call neighborhood cliques. And in my neighborhood, I'm a clique. And I go to every neighbor in that neighborhood. and I go and talk about people like yourself and what you're going to do. I know about you because I've read about you. And so when I ask them a little bit about you and they don't know anything about you, that's when I come in. So what you're talking about, I've been doing ever since you announced that you're going to be governor.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. This is what we need right now. This is a great example. Everyone should follow you. Thank you.
All right, here we go.
Good evening. My name is Max Real from Sugar Land, Texas. I will be a first-time voter in November. And of course, I'll be voting for you. But I have one question, especially for your younger voters. This is a primary issue for us. How will your administration handle the climate crisis, and how will Texas lead the country in renewable energy and diversify our economy from oil?
Great question, and we had a version of this earlier in terms of how to expand our energy leadership in those 4 renewable sources that we talked about: geothermal, hydrogen, wind, and solar. We also, as folks will remind me when I'm in rural parts of Texas, we got to look at the land, the topsoil that we're losing, the water systems that are so fouled in Texas that people cannot drink from them right now. Having a Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that is not captured by the corporations that is supposed to regulate and oversee, but is fighting for the families who breathe the air, drink the water, and are dependent on that soil right now, not only protects our lives in the short term, but it allows us to be a leader on confronting this challenge of climate that is the most important and the most existential. No state is better set up or prepared to do this than the state of Texas. And I want to make sure that we all understand that in addition to the most important dynamic of this, which is averting catastrophe for your generation and every generation that follows, this is connected to high skill, high wage, high value jobs that we want to be creating here, union jobs that we want to be creating here in the state of Texas. And it also gives us pride of place on leading the revolution that is taking place across the world. We know that the world is only going in one direction. The 2 questions are, how fast will it get there in terms of converting to renewable in this energy expansion? And then who will take the lead at the end of the day? I want it to be Texas. I think you can harness the market, our innovation, our academic institutions, the leadership that you already have here in Southeast Texas to this challenge, and we will win it. But it's going to take people like you, holding people like me accountable to get that job done at the end of the day. So not only am I counting on your vote, I'm counting on you where we are on this once we win this, making sure that we hold true to our promises to you and the generations that follow. Thank you for asking the question. I appreciate it.
All right, we're straight back here. What great questions. These are going to be my last 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a teacher from Pasadena, and we actually have a program in Texas called 21st Century ACE, the after-school program, and apparently every year it gets evaluated, and if the school is doing good, they could lose that program. The thing is, our students now are different from the students that we had a year or 2 ago, and so we're being evaluated on different students. The thing is, all the students in Texas, they need these community programs at all the schools, especially with the pandemic as it is, and just it's a good program that works in Texas, 21st Century ACE, and we're losing them at some campuses. So we'd love to have expansion of a program that works right now.
I appreciate you sharing that with us, and also for what you do and your public service to this community. I'll tell you, these schools, in addition to the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic, are a lifeline for kids who've gone through extraordinary trauma in their lives. These teachers and these programs are keeping them alive right now. The level of suicidal ideation, and unfortunately the level of suicide that we're seeing amongst our young kids right now, very often is that classroom teacher or counselor or school nurse or librarian who is going to connect that kid with the care and the help that they need. But we want to make sure the programs are in place. I remember visiting Kashmir Gardens after Hurricane Harvey, and I mean, the community was just wiped out. Every single library, I believe at the time, was still closed down, had yet to reopen. But I said, is there any good news at all, to one of the neighborhood leaders there? I think it was Keith Downey. And they said, you know, Kashmir Elementary is a place where these kids who have been literally flooded out of their homes and are living in their grandparents' cars in front of the home that used to exist there. That's where they go for not only hot meals, but also access to mental health care, to after-school activities, to finding that purpose in what they do outside of their home or that car that they're living in right now. So I think we got to keep that in mind. It is more than just the academics, as important as the academics are, and we fail to invest in this to our peril and the peril of those kids. So thanks for asking that. Appreciate it.
Hello?
There we go.
Hi. Part of the reason why I'm asking this question is because I want to show my son who's here that you can stand up in front of a lot of people and have a microphone to your mouth and ask a question because you're curious and not get made fun of. He didn't want to ask a question himself, but this is not necessarily a popular position to have in Texas in particular, but I would just wanted to urge you to do what you can to make Texas a more welcoming place for people who are fleeing persecution, seeking asylum here in the United States. We're a land of immigrants. Our Statue of Liberty says that you're tired, you're poor, you're covered in masses, yearning to breathe free. And I just find it really repugnant that our taxpayer dollars are being spent on Operation Lone Star. Our taxpayer dollars are being spent to pay Stephen Miller's law firm to sue the Biden administration to prevent Biden's policies, which are attempting to restore our asylum system and to repair the harm to it that the Trump administration had previously done. And so I just urge you to do what you can again to make Texas a more welcoming place for refugees and asylum seekers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, your son is going to be proud. We're all proud of what you just said. I agree with everything that you said. You know, Texas used to be known for being the defining border state and the connection to the rest of the world. In my it's kind of like the Ellis Island of the Americas. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands first set foot in the United States in Segundo Barrio and had an apartment there before either moving to another part of El Paso or staying in Segundo Barrio or coming to Houston or here in Fort Bend or somewhere else. And we're so proud of that. And I tell people El Paso is one of the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because of the fact that a quarter of those with whom I live were born somewhere else. And they chose us. They wanted to come here and they wanted to do better for themselves, but they also wanted to do better for all of us. And they have made us more successful. They have made us stronger and they have made us safer. So this ridiculous stuff that Abbott is doing at the border, the busing migrants to Washington, D.C., the activation of 10,000 members of the Guard involuntarily taken away from their families, their communities, their kids, their careers to sit in Humvees and really deal with some really challenging things. 4 of them have taken their lives just since this activation started so far. Not listening to border communities about what they need, or those groups that actually work with immigrants and especially asylum seekers like Annunciation House in El Paso, Texas, which literally helps the most vulnerable who are fleeing thousands of miles from persecution and brutality. And then ending Title 42 makes sense, right? Title 42 summarily rejects every single asylum seeker just on their face right around. They go back into Mexico, where they may then become part of this migrant protection protocol, this Orwellian name system that keeps them in shelters or slums, waiting to lawfully and orderly have their asylum request heard, which we should by the rule of law. So Texas, if we can get past this craziness and these stunts, can get back to leading on an issue that we know better than anyone else. And wouldn't you love it if you had a governor who could bring the people of this state together and go to Washington and help us to rewrite our immigration laws in our own image based on our values and our needs and those priorities that we hold dear as Texans. So thank you for the question.
Okay, this is going to be our last question, but we are going to stay. So if you'd like to say hi or take a picture right where that flag is, where Beto is, we're going to be right there. The line will start on the right and you'll exit to the left.
Hello, Mr. O'Rourke. My name is Darnell Grantham and I'm an information technology professional. professional. And you know, I talk to a lot of young people, and you know, we talk about college. The cost of college tuition has gone up. I went to Texas A&M, I went to U of H, and I mean it's tremendous what tuition costs now. But I'm also looking at a degradation of test scores in some of the inner city schools. What can you as governor do to encourage science, technology, engineering, and math in our inner city public schools? And what can we do to energize the kids, you know, to want to get into science and technology for a better workplace in Texas?
Wow, I love this question. Mr. Grantham, thank you for this. This is great. Some of the best schools that I've visited around the state, I was just at one in Port Arthur Memorial High School. They are working with the local large employers. It could be in information technology there was a refinery that they were working closely with, where they're helping those students understand why science and math and technology education is going to help them later in life. It's not an abstraction, it's not just academic, it is a wonderful paycheck, it is a career, and it's a way to be able to stay in Port Arthur and not just be able to do well for yourself, but also for your family and your larger community. The look on the faces of those kids in those classes was amazing. I mean, they were just on fire, so proud of what they were doing because they connected it to a real world need that we have in Port Arthur. I know the same is true, could be true in Fort Bend, same true in Harris County and in other parts of this state. Roscoe, Texas, more rural and conservative part of the state. Those young age of 18 from high school, and many of them also have a remote FAA pilot's license to do the remote drone inspections on the wind turbines that dot the landscape there. So I think we've got to connect these things with kids. I would love, actually, Cynthia, if you could make sure that we follow up with this gentleman as well. I'd love to find out what those employment opportunities are here that we can connect young people with, or if someone is already doing that right now. My son is in one of these programs at El Paso High, but I'll just be honest with you, sometimes he asks us, like, what does this mean for me later on in my life? How will I use this? And we as parents have to do a better job. I think we as a society can do a better job of connecting those two things and making sure that, as that person at the IBEW Hall said, this is question. I know we can make a better connection there going forward. Thank you so much. Missouri City, thank you for having us out. Very, very grateful for the very warm welcome. We'll stick around for a little while to take pictures with anyone who wants to. Thank you all. Gracias.